The chlorine burned her eyes as she stared at the demolition notice taped to her fence. Karen Mitchell had crossed the wrong line this time, demanding HOA approval for a pool that predated the entire neighborhood by 15 years. But when Sarah dug into Karen's past, she discovered something that would turn their quiet suburban street into a battlefield. Because Karen wasn't just lying about the HOA rules, she was lying about everything. Sarah Chen had been looking forward to this Saturday morning for weeks. The azure water of her newly renovated pool sparkled in the June sunlight. The Italian tiles she'd saved 2 years to afford finally installed around the perimeter. She'd invited her daughter Emma's swim team over for the season kickoff party, and 20 excited 12-year-olds were due to arrive in 3 hours. She was adjusting the pool's pH levels when the shadow fell across the water. "Excuse me." Sarah looked up to see a woman in her 60s standing at the gate, clipboard in hand, her gray hair pulled back in a severe bun that seemed to tighten her entire face. The woman wore a pressed blazer despite the 80-degree heat and had the unmistakable bearing of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Yes?" Sarah straightened, brushing her hands on her shorts. "I'm Karen Mitchell from the Willowbrook HOA. I live at 1247 Maple." She gestured vaguely toward the house 3 doors down. "I need to discuss your renovation project." Sarah felt her stomach tighten. She'd lived in this neighborhood for 8 years and had never had a single HOA issue. The pool had been here when she bought the house installed by the previous owners in 2009, long before any HOA restrictions on pool installations. "What about it?" Karen consulted her clipboard with theatrical precision. "According to our records, you failed to submit the proper permits and architectural review forms before beginning this extensive renovation. The HOA requires advance approval for any exterior modifications that could affect property values or neighborhood aesthetics." "This isn't a new pool," Sarah said carefully. "I renovated an existing one, and I did pull city permits for the tile work. The scope of the renovation effectively constitutes a new installation." Karen's voice carried the practiced authority of someone who delivered this speech before. "You've changed the entire appearance, added new decking, installed lighting, systems. The HOA Architectural Committee should have reviewed and approved these plans." Sarah's hands clenched at her sides. Through the kitchen window, she could see Emma inside, arranging party favors on the counter with the concentrated focus that meant she was nervous about her friends coming over. This party meant everything to her daughter, who'd struggled to fit in since the divorce. "I'm sorry, but I think there's been a misunderstanding," Sarah said. "I followed all the city requirements. The pool predates any HOA restrictions." Mrs. Chen, Karen's tone sharpened. "I've been on the Architectural Review Board for 7 years. I know the regulations better than most homeowners. You have 72 hours to submit the proper documentation, including detailed plans, materials, specifications, and neighbor impact assessments. Until then, the pool area is considered a non-compliant installation." She reached into her blazer and produced a yellow notice, holding it out like a parking ticket. "This is a temporary cease and desist order. No swimming until compliance is achieved." Sarah stared at the paper. "You can't be serious. My daughter has 20 kids coming over in 3 hours. That's unfortunate timing on your part." Karen's expression didn't soften. "Perhaps you should have considered HOA requirements before planning recreational activities around a non-compliant installation." "This is ridiculous." Sarah's voice rose. "The pool has been here for 15 years. Half the neighborhood has. Pools that were installed without your precious review process. Those installations were grandfathered under different regulations." Karen's clipboard clicked as she flipped to another page. "Your renovation exceeded the 50% rule. When improvements equal or exceed 50% of the original installation's value, it's considered new construction under current HOA guidelines." Sarah felt heat building behind her eyes. She'd spent her entire savings on this renovation, working double shifts at the hospital to afford the tiles Emma had fallen in love with. The pool wasn't just a luxury, it was therapy. Emma had been struggling with anxiety since the divorce, and swimming was the one thing that brought her peace. "Show me the rule," she demanded. Karen's eyebrows lifted. "Excuse me, show me where it says 50% renovation equals new construction. Show me your Architectural Review Board authority. Show me anything that gives you the right to shut down my pool 3 hours before my daughter's party." For the first time, Karen's composure flickered. Her grip tightened on the clipboard. "Mrs. Chen, I don't appreciate your tone. The HOA board has delegated authority to issue compliance notices. Which board members?" Sarah stepped closer. "Because I've lived here 8 years and I've never seen an HOA meeting notice, never received a newsletter, never got voting information. So which board members gave you this authority?" Karen's face flushed. "The board operates under established bylaws, Karen." Both women turned. Tom Rodriguez, Sarah's next-door neighbor, was leaning against his fence with a coffee mug in his hand. He was a retired lawyer with kind eyes and the patient manner of someone who'd spent decades dealing with difficult people. "Morning, Tom." Sarah's voice was tight. "Karen, what's this about?" Tom's tone was conversational, but Sarah caught the edge underneath. "HOA business, Mr. Rodriguez." Mrs. Chen failed to obtain proper approvals for her pool renovation. Tom took a slow sip of coffee. "That's interesting. When did the HOA start requiring renovation permits?" "The architectural review process has been in place for years because I've been getting city permits for my deck expansion, and nobody mentioned HOA approval." Tom's voice remained pleasant. "And I definitely haven't received any HOA communications about new requirements." Karen's jaw tightened. "Perhaps you need to update your contact information with the board." "Maybe I do." Tom smiled. "What's the board president's name again?" "I'd like to discuss these new requirements." The silence stretched until Sarah could hear the pool filter humming. Karen's knuckles were white against the clipboard. "The board roster is available through proper channels," she said finally. "What channels would those be?" Another pause. Then Karen straightened her blazer and fixed Sarah with a cold stare. "Mrs. Chen, you have 72 hours. The cease and order stands." She turned to go, then paused. "And I'd suggest you tell your daughter's friends to find somewhere else to swim today." Liability concerns. She walked away with precise steps, her heels clicking against the sidewalk. Sarah watched her go, the yellow notice crumpled in her fist. Behind her, the filter hummed peacefully, and somewhere in the house, Emma was probably putting the final touches on decorations that would now go unused. Tom appeared at her side. "You okay now?" Sarah's voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. "Tom, have you ever received any HOA documents? Elections, meetings, anything?" "Not a single piece of paper in 15 years. He paused. "You want my advice? Start making phone calls, because that woman just made a very expensive mistake." Sarah looked down at the notice in her hand, then back at her house where her daughter was preparing for a party that would never happen. "What kind of mistake?" Tom's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. The kind where someone who isn't actually on the HOA board just issued an official cease and desist order on HOA letterhead. The implications hit Sarah like ice water. She looked toward Karen's house, then back at Tom. "How do you know she's not on the board?" "Because," Tom said quietly, "there is no board. The HOA was dissolved for non-compliance 3 years ago, and Karen Mitchell knows it." 2 hours later, Sarah sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by printouts, phone records, and a laptop displaying the county clerk's website. Emma had retreated to her room after Sarah gently explained that the party had to be postponed. The devastation on her daughter's face had nearly broken her resolve to handle this legally rather than marching over to Karen's house with a baseball bat. Tom had provided the crucial first lead, the HOA dissolution, filing from 2021. But that was just the beginning. "Look at this," Sarah said into her phone. Her sister Lisa, a paralegal in Phoenix, had been walking her through the record search. The HOA was dissolved for failure to file annual reports and maintain proper board elections. But here's the interesting part. Karen Mitchell was listed as treasurer on the final dissolution papers. "So she knew it was defunct," Lisa said. "What else are you finding?" Sarah clicked through browser tabs. Property records show she's been collecting HOA dues from at least 6 neighbors for the past 2 years. Mr. Patterson down the street paid her $300 last month for landscaping violations. That's fraud. It gets worse. Sarah's voice was grim. "I called the city planning office. They have no record of any HOA architectural review requirements in our subdivision. Never have. The whole thing was a lie from day one." She heard Lisa's sharp intake of breath. "Sarah, this isn't just about your pool anymore. This woman has been running a long-term scam. A knock at the door interrupted them. Sarah looked through the peephole to see Tom standing on her porch, with another man tall, Hispanic, wearing a polo shirt and carrying a briefcase. "Lisa, I'll call you back." She opened the door to find Tom looking grimmer than she'd ever seen him. "Sarah, this is Detective Martinez with the Sheriff's Department. I called him after you mentioned the dues collection." Detective Martinez stepped forward with a badge. "Mrs. Chen, I understand you've been investigating some irregularities with your homeowners association. That's putting it mildly." Sarah gestured them inside. "Would you like to see what I've found?" 20 minutes later, Detective Martinez was photographing the fake cease and desist order while making notes in a leather portfolio. Sarah had walked him through everything: the dissolution records, the fraudulent dues collection, the non-existent architectural review board. "How many neighbors has she collected money from?" Martinez asked. "At least 8 that I can confirm." Sarah pulled up her spreadsheet. "Mrs. Henderson paid $400 for a mailbox violation last year. The Nguyen family paid $200 for their garden gnomes. It goes back at least 3 years. We're talking about several $1,000s in fraudulent collections," Tom added. And that's just what Sarah found in 4 hours. Martinez closed his notebook. "Mrs. Chen, I need to ask, what do you want to happen here?" Sarah looked out the window toward Karen's house. Through the living room window, she could see Karen moving around, probably preparing dinner, completely unaware that her world was about to collapse. "I want my daughter to have her pool party," she said quietly, "and I want everyone in this neighborhood to know they've been scammed. The fraud charges will take time to process," Martinez warned. "But the cease and desist order is immediately invalid. She had no authority to issue it." "What about the money she collected?" "That's restitution, assuming we can prove intent to defraud. But I have to warn you, she might claim she genuinely believed the HOA was still active." Tom snorted. "Hard to claim ignorance when you signed the dissolution papers." Martinez smiled grimly. "That's what I was hoping you'd say." After the detective left, Sarah sat alone in her kitchen, staring at the yellow notice. The absurdity of it struck her. She'd spent the morning terrified of an authority that didn't exist, issued by a woman who'd been stealing from the neighborhood for years. Her phone buzzed. A text from Emma, Mom Jenny's mom, called. "She wants to know if the party is still on." Sarah looked out at the pool, its surface mirror-smooth in the afternoon light. Then she looked toward Karen's house, where the porch light had just come on. She typed back, "Tell everyone to come over at 6 p.m. instead and bring extra towels." But first, she had one more call to make. "Neighborhood Watch Coordinator." A cheerful voice answered. "Hi, this is Sarah Chen from Willowbrook Subdivision. I'd like to organize an emergency neighborhood meeting for tomorrow evening. We have a security issue that affects everyone." "What kind of security issue?" Sarah watched Karen's silhouette move past the window, the kind where someone has been impersonating an HOA official and collecting fraudulent fees from residents. The coordinator's tone sharpened. "How many residents are affected?" "All of them," Sarah said, "and they don't know it yet." As she hung up, she noticed movement in Karen's front yard. The woman herself was dragging a trash bin to the curb, moving with the same brisk efficiency she'd displayed that morning. But now Sarah could see it for what it was, the calculated movements of someone who'd been playing a role for years. Tomorrow, the entire neighborhood would know the truth. But tonight, Emma was going to have her pool party. Sarah walked outside and removed the yellow notice from the fence. Then she tore it into small pieces and scattered them into the wind, watching Karen's fake authority blow away like confetti. From the house next door, Tom raised his coffee mug in a silent salute. The pool party was about to begin, and Karen Mitchell's reign of terror was about to end. But as Sarah watched the last pieces of yellow paper disappear into the evening breeze, she had no idea that Karen was standing at her bedroom window, watching through the curtains, her face twisted. With rage, the war was just beginning. The pool party was in full swing by 7 p.m. 20 kids splashed in the azure water, while parents clustered around Sarah's patio, cold drinks in hand, their laughter echoing off the surrounding houses. Emma's face glowed with happiness as she executed a perfect cannonball, sending waves across the newly tiled surface that had nearly been declared off-limits that morning. But Sarah's attention kept drifting to the gathering crowd in Tom's backyard next door, where a very different kind of meeting was taking place. Mrs. Chen, Jenny's mother, Lisa Park, approached with a concerned expression. "Tom Rodriguez asked me to give you this." She handed over a folded paper. He said it was urgent. Sarah unfolded the note. "Patterson and Nugent families here. Mrs. Henderson, on her way. We need to talk." Tishi looked over the fence to see Tom in animated conversation with several neighbors, all holding papers. Mr. Patterson was gesturing angrily at a document, while Mrs. Nguyen shook her head in disbelief. "Everything okay?" Lisa asked. "Actually, no." Sarah made a decision. "Lisa, could you keep an eye on the kids for a few minutes? There's something all the parents need to hear." 10 minutes later, Sarah stood between the two backyards, addressing a crowd that had grown to include most of the adults from the pool party, plus the neighbors from Tom's meeting. Emma and the other kids continued swimming, blissfully unaware of the drama unfolding around them. "I know this seems like an odd time for a neighborhood meeting," Sarah began, "but what happened to me today affects all of you." She held up the yellow cease and desist order. "This morning, Karen Mitchell tried to shut down my pool party, claiming HOA authority she doesn't have. But while investigating her claims, I discovered something much worse." Tom stepped forward with a manila folder. "Karen has been collecting fraudulent HOA fees from residents for at least 3 years. The actual HOA was dissolved in 2020, when she signed the dissolution papers herself." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Henderson, an elderly woman with silver hair, raised her hand shakily. "I paid her $400 last year," she said. "She said my mailbox was the wrong color." "And I paid $200 for my garden gnomes," added Mr. Nguyen. "She said they violated neighborhood standards." One by one, more stories emerged. The Pattersons had been fined for parking their RV in their driveway. The Johnsons paid $300 for their fence height. The Martinez family, no relation to the detective, had been charged for their children's swing set. "How much are we talking about total?" asked David Park, Lisa's husband. Tom consulted his notes. "Based on what we've confirmed tonight, over $6,000 in the past 2 years alone." The crowd erupted in angry voices. Sarah watched faces transform from confusion to understanding to rage as neighbors realized they'd been systematically scammed by someone they'd trusted. "What can we do about it?" Mrs. Henderson's voice quavered with anger. "The sheriff's department is already investigating," Sarah said. "Detective Martinez was here this afternoon. But there's something else we need to discuss." She paused, looking toward Karen's house. The lights were on, but the curtains were drawn. Karen knows we're on to her. This afternoon, she watched me tear up her fake cease and desist order. She's probably preparing for what comes next. "What do you mean?" asked Jenny's father. Tom's expression was grim. "Karen Mitchell doesn't strike me as someone who gives up easily. She's been running this scam for years, collecting thousands of dollars, wielding fake authority over an entire neighborhood. People like that don't just accept defeat." As if summoned by his words, Karen's front door opened. She emerged in a dark coat, moving quickly toward a sedan parked in her driveway. Even from a distance, her movements looked urgent, almost frantic. "She's leaving," someone whispered. They watched in silence as Karen loaded 2 large suitcases into her trunk, then hurried back inside. Minutes later, she emerged with a third bag and what looked like a file box. "Should we call the police?" Mrs. Nguyen asked. Sarah was already dialing. "Detective Martinez, this is Sarah Chen. Karen Mitchell is loading her car like she's leaving town." "Yes, we're all watching." "Okay, we'll stay back." She hung up and addressed the crowd. "He's sending a patrol car, but it'll take 10 minutes to get here." Karen had finished loading and was now standing beside her car, talking rapidly into her phone. Her voice carried across the quiet evening air, though her words were indistinct. "She's calling someone," Tom observed, "probably warning them about the investigation." The sound of Karen's car door slamming echoed like a gunshot. Her engine started with a roar that seemed unnaturally loud in the suburban quiet, but instead of backing out of her driveway, Karen rolled down her window and turned toward the gathering of neighbors. Even from 50 yards away, Sarah could see the fury on her face. "This isn't over." Karen's voice cut through the evening air. "You people have no idea what you've started." She gunned the engine, but instead of leaving, she drove slowly down the street, stopping directly in front of Tom's house, where most of the neighbors were standing. The window rolled down again. Sarah Chen. Karen's voice was raw with rage. You've made a very big mistake. I know people in this town. I have connections. You think one little phone call to the sheriff's department is going to protect you? Sarah stepped forward, her heart pounding but her voice steady. Karen, you need to leave. Now, I built this neighborhood, Karen screamed. I maintained property values. I kept the riffraff out, and this is how you repay me, by stealing our money, Mr. Patterson shouted back. By lying about authority you never had. Karen's laugh was sharp and bitter. Authority? You want to talk about authority? I'll show you authority. She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone, speed dialing a number. Hello, City Planning. This is Karen Mitchell. I need to report multiple code violations in the Willowbrook subdivision. ... Yes, I'll hold. The neighbors exchanged alarmed glances. Even if her HOA claims were fake, city code violations were real. What is she doing? Lisa whispered. Tom's face was pale. She's calling in legitimate violations to punish us for exposing her fraud. Karen's voice rose triumphantly. Yes, I'd like to report several properties with unpermitted structures, illegal fence heights, and commercial vehicles in residential driveways. She began rattling off addresses: the Pattersons' RV, the Johnsons' fence, Tom's deck expansion that was still under construction. Sarah felt a chill of realization. Karen might have been running a fake HOA, but she'd been documenting real violations for years, building a weapon she could use if anyone ever challenged her. She's been planning this, Sarah said quietly. She's been collecting information on everyone, waiting for someone to cross her. The sound of sirens grew louder. Karen heard them too and began speaking faster into her phone, trying to file as many complaints as possible before the police arrived. But as the patrol car rounded the corner, its lights flashing, Karen made one final mistake. She rolled down her window and shouted at the approaching officer. I'm reporting a neighborhood conspiracy to file false police reports. These people are trying to frame me. Detective Martinez stepped out of the passenger side, his expression calm but dangerous. Mrs. Mitchell, he called out, I need you to step out of the vehicle. I'm leaving town on legitimate business, Karen replied, her voice cracking. These people are harassing me. Ma'am, you're not under arrest, but I need to speak with you about some financial irregularities that have come to our attention. Karen's composure finally shattered. She slumped over the steering wheel, her shoulders shaking. The fight went out of her all at once, replaced by the deflated posture of someone whose long con had finally collapsed. As Martinez approached her, Sarah heard Karen whisper something that chilled her blood. You have no idea what you've unleashed. This was just the beginning. 3 days later, Sarah was reviewing insurance paperwork in her home office when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, she saw Detective Martinez standing on her porch with a woman in a navy suit, tall, blonde, with the kind of sharp features that suggested she'd spent years asking difficult questions. Mrs. Chen, Martinez said when she opened the door. This is Agent Rebecca Foster from the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. We need to talk. Sarah's stomach dropped. FBI Agent Foster stepped forward with a badge and a grim expression. Mrs. Chen, your complaint about Karen Mitchell has opened a much larger investigation. May we come in? They settled in the living room, where Foster opened a thick folder filled with photographs, bank statements, and what looked like surveillance photos. Karen Mitchell isn't just a neighborhood scammer, Foster began. She's been running a sophisticated real estate fraud operation across 3 counties for the past 5 years. Sarah stared at the documents. What kind of operation? Fake HOA schemes in at least 12 subdivisions, Martinez explained. She targets neighborhoods with dissolved or inactive HOAs, then creates fake boards and architectural committees. But the dues collection was just the entry point. Foster spread out a series of photographs showing different houses. Once she establishes authority in a neighborhood, she begins identifying properties with elderly owners or absentee landlords. Then she creates violations that require expensive remediation. Like what? Foundation issues, environmental problems, structural defects that don't actually exist. Foster's voice was clinical. She recommends specific contractors to fix these phantom problems, contractors who are part of her network. The homeowners pay tens of thousands for unnecessary work, and she takes a percentage. Sarah felt sick. How much money are we talking about? Conservative estimate. Over $2 million across all the neighborhoods. Foster paused. But that's not why we're here. She pulled out a manila envelope and extracted a series of documents. 3 days ago, Karen Mitchell made bail and disappeared. She left behind a storage unit full of files that tell a very different story about your neighborhood. Foster handed Sarah a thick folder labeled Willowbrook Phase 2. Sarah opened it with trembling hands. Inside were detailed property assessments, financial profiles of every household, and what looked like architectural plans. But these weren't fake HOA documents. They were legitimate city planning papers, stamped and approved. What am I looking at? A rezoning application for your entire subdivision? Martinez said quietly. Filed 6 months ago by something called Willowbrook Development LLC. Sarah's blood turned cold. Rezoning for what? Commercial and hide-and-seedy residential. Foster's expression was grave. Strip malls, apartment complexes, chain restaurants. Your neighborhood was going to be bulldozed. The document swam before Sarah's eyes. She saw her address listed under priority acquisition, along with detailed notes about her family situation. Single mother, financial strain, pool renovation debt, excellent candidate for buyout pressure. She was targeting me specifically. All of you, Foster confirmed. Look at page 12. Sarah flipped through the papers and found a spreadsheet titled Resident Compliance Matrix. Every household in the neighborhood was listed with detailed psychological profiles and recommended manipulation strategies. Tom Rodriguez, retired. Lawyer, potential resistance. Neutralize with technical violations and legal intimidation. The Henderson family, elderly, fixed income, health issues. Medical emergency angle. The New Yen family, recent immigrants, avoid authority. Cultural intimidation, effective, and at the bottom, highlighted in yellow, Chen, Sarah, single mother, financial vulnerability. Daughters, social needs. Pool, party disruption successful. Ready for phase 2, phase 2. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Foster turned to another section of the folder. Forced buyouts. Once she'd collected enough violations and fines, she was going to offer each family a choice. Sell to Willowbrook Development LLC at below market rates, or face mounting legal fees and code enforcement actions that would eventually force foreclosure. Sarah stared at the papers. And if we refused, look at the contractor list, Martinez said grimly. Sarah found the page and felt her world tilt. The recommended contractors for violation. Remediation weren't just part of Karen's network. They were also listed as the construction crew for the commercial development. She was going to sabotage our houses, Sarah realized. Create real problems during the repairs that would make them uninhabitable. Exactly. Foster's voice was cold. Foundation damage, electrical problems, plumbing failures. All designed to make selling to her development company the only viable option. Sarah thought about Mrs. Henderson's mailbox violation and shuddered. How close was she to phase 2? According to her timeline, she was planning to start buyout offers next month. Martinez paused. Your pool party confrontation accelerated everything. She was supposed to have 6 more months to collect violations and establish legal precedent for the forced sales. That's why she was so angry, Sarah said slowly. It wasn't just about being exposed. We ruined years of planning. Foster nodded. And now she's in the wind with detailed information about every family in your neighborhood. Financial data, daily routines, security vulnerabilities. Are we in danger? We don't know, Foster admitted. But Karen Mitchell has connections we're still uncovering. The development company has ties to several shell corporations and offshore accounts. This goes well beyond one woman running fake HOA scams. Sarah looked out her window toward the houses where her neighbors lived, families who had no idea how close they'd come to losing everything. What happens now? We need your help, Martinez said. You're the one who exposed her operation. She's going to see you as the primary threat. You want me to be bait? We want you to be careful, Foster corrected. But, yes, there's a good chance she'll try to contact you. When she does, we need to know immediately. As if summoned by their conversation, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You should have minded your own business, Sarah. Now everyone you care about is going to pay the price. This isn't over. Kay Foster and Martinez exchanged glances. That was faster than expected, Foster said. Sarah's hands were shaking as she showed them the message. She's threatening my daughter. We're going to put protection details on your family and the key witnesses, Martinez assured her. But Sarah, you need to understand Karen Mitchell isn't just angry about the money. You've destroyed a multi-million-dollar operation that took years to set up. Another text arrived. Check your property tax assessment. Sarah, interesting things happen when neighborhoods get ... problematic. Foster was already on her phone, calling someone. We need a team at the county assessor's office, now, and check for any recent filings on Willowbrook subdivision properties. She hung up and turned to Sarah. Pack a bag. You and Emma are staying in a safe house tonight? Is that really necessary? Martinez's expression was deadly serious. Sarah, we found something else in Karen's storage unit. Blueprints of your house. Every window, door, and security system. She knows exactly how to get to you. As Sarah ran upstairs to pack, her phone buzzed again. This time it was a photo, her own house, taken from Karen's bedroom window, with a red X drawn over Emma's room. The message below it read, "See you." Soon, the pool party had been just the beginning. Now the real war was about to start.